Okay, so in this short video, I want to talk about how to chunk up a string. So say you have a string of a certain size, and you have a certain chunk size in mind. How would you break up this larger string into those smaller chunks? So I want to demonstrate three approaches. The first approach, probably the simplest one of the three, is just to use a substring and a for loop. Okay, so if you think about your first chunk, will probably be substring, let's say from 0 to 5. So what is that? If you print it out, you'll see that that's indeed what we're trying to get. Our first chunk would be apple. So you start from 0 and you go to until 5, not including 5. Now the good part also is that substring, if you provide it the finish index, the last index of, let's say, 1,000, right, which is clearly larger than the string you're trying to substring, it doesn't mind. It will just give you all the characters until the end. And that's actually a good thing, because even if you specify something that's larger than what you're trying to do, it won't complain. So what we could do is we could have a result 1, which is an empty array. Then we could have a for loop that basically starts at 0, and the start will go the length of a string, so test.length, and then we'll do start. We're going to step through the string the chunk size at a time. So in this case 5, but really any chunk, and then we're going to put this here. And instead of 1,000, we're going to do substring of start. And this will be start plus chunk size, like so. You could see that it's clearly chunking it up correctly. And then we're going to do result 1, push the chunk into the array. And at this point, we should be done. We're just going to print out the result 1, which is clearly going to be what we want. Perfect. And let's remove the chunk. And even though we're going to have a chunk size, which is going to probably go beyond the size, the length of a string, that's fine, because as we said, the substring doesn't care and doesn't complain. So that's the first approach. The second approach would be to use array reduce. So array reduce is a method that allows you, for example, to calculate the sum of an array. So let's say you have an array, 1, 2, 3. You could do reduce, and then you could have an accumulator as a first parameter. Then you have the actual element as the second one. And then inside, you always want to return the accumulator. And then we're going to add the element to the accumulator, like so. And if you print out sum here, you'll see that sum indeed is 6. So we're going to use this reduce method for chunking up a string. Now, the first obvious question is, well, we don't have an array, we have a string. Well, that's true, but we could easily make an array out of string by just doing array from string. So as you could see here, just by saying array from test, we have ourselves an array of characters, And if you think about it, it makes sense because a string is basically just an array of characters. So that's going to be our first step, make an array. Then our second step is going to be to use a reduce on this array. And again, the idea of reduce is just reducing the array to something that's useful. Instead of just mapping through each character, we're going to make something out of it. In this case, we're going to make an array that has chunks. So how are we going to do that? So the callback, the reduce callback takes, as I mentioned, accumulator as the first parameter. Then it takes the element, takes an index for each element in the array, what its index is, and then the original array. And then it also takes a second parameter. The reduce takes a second parameter, which is the beginning of how does this all start. How does the accumulator begin? So the accumulator is going to begin with an empty array. So again, we always want to return the accumulator. That's important. So even if we don't end up doing anything with the element, we're going to return the accumulator, so the next iteration could have something to munch on. And then we're going to say if index, if remainder of an index, right? So index modulus chunk size, if that's 0, which basically means that at every, let's say in this case, 0, 5, 10, we're going to actually take a slice of an array. So we have an original array. So our chunk is going to be, constant chunk is going to be original array, slice. So slice is another method we're going to be using. So reduce and slice. So we're going to take a slice where the beginning of it is going to be the actual index we're at right now, and the final thing is going to be index plus chunk size. So very similar to how we have a substring for strings, we have slice for an array. And then if we print this out, we're going to see that our chunk is indeed a slice of an array. Now, because it's actually an array of characters, it would be nice to actually make a string out of it, which is pretty easy. You just do join, and then we're going to join it without anything in the middle. So that will just give you all the characters, so in this case apple, for example, without anything in the middle. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and put that onto our accumulator, push the chunk. So we don't need this anymore. So basically the way this works, every chunk size of index, so probably 0, 5, and so on, we're going to do these two lines, which is basically take a slice of an array and add it to the accumulator. If the index is not 0, 5, 10, and so on, we're just going to return the accumulator as it is. Our array is going to be filling up with these chunks. Now, because we're not actually using the elm parameter, it's a good practice to just specify it as an underscore. This way, it's a good way to communicate to others that even though there is a parameter here, it's a second parameter in this function, we're not using it, so we're just going to put an underscore in there. So that's that. So this is going to be our second result, result 2. Let's print out our result 2 here. Result 2. And as you could see, result 2 is the same as result 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks. So that's the second approach. The third approach is going to be using regular expressions. So we could create a regular expression. Let's call it chunker regex. That basically, so it's going to have, let's keep it simple. So we're going to do, it's going to be an expression that's going to be a dot, which is any character. And we could specify that, let's say we want a size of 5. And then we're also going to specify that we want this globally. So what this means is that if we have a string, so in this case, and this is going to be our final result 3 in this case, if we have a string, so let's say test, and we match this regular expression, chunker regex, right? It's going to basically try to suck out as many, so dot means any character, and 5 means exactly 5 of those any characters. So it's going to suck out the chunks one by one out of the string and put them to array. So in this case, if we print this out, result 3, you could see that it will indeed suck out 3 chunks, apple, apple, apple. Now, that's because our chunk size is 5. But you could also specify the min and the max. So you could say any chunk size of 1 up to 5, get those chunks out of a string. So greedy, so regular expressions are greedy, which means it's going to always try to grab the largest chunk, which is 5. So it's going to say, all right, I have this string here, give me the first 5 characters, and then another 5, another 5, and then the last one, it's going to say, well, I would love to get 5, but I could only have 3, so that I'll take that. So now this is all very nice, but how would you do this dynamically, right? Because 5 is a hard-coded value. So we're going to do a string literal, like so, and we're going to say, instead of hard-coding it, let's use a dynamic size of chunk size, and that's all you need to do. So you have result 1, 2, and 3, and then if we want to change our chunk size to, let's say, 4, that's easy. We have those results as well, and that works. If you liked this video, please subscribe to this channel, and I'll make more of these.